I once claimed that only superficial people care about weight. I used to say it with so much conviction, believing that I was above the societal pressures that seemed to govern the way people judged each other. At the time, I thought I was a progressive, confident woman who wasn't bound by such trivial concerns. I believed that my marriage to Tom, my husband of 12 years, was grounded in something deeper than appearances. We loved each other for who we were, not for how we looked. But, as I sit here in the quiet of our living room, I can't ignore the feeling of unease creeping up inside me. Tom has changed. The man I thought I knew, the man who once joined me in mocking those obsessed with weight and image, has become a stranger. It started with the subtle things, small comments about his new workout routine and how he felt more energized lately. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we were both growing older, both trying to find ways to feel better about ourselves in the middle of the grind of life. It wasn't a big deal. But it grew. Gradually, I began to notice the signs. He would spend hours at the gym even after work, despite his busy schedule. His dinners became smaller, more controlled. He started bringing home meal prep containers instead of the comforting takeout we used to enjoy. The television shows he watched, the ones we used to watch together on lazy evenings, were replaced with documentaries on health, fitness, and nutrition. I had convinced myself it was just a phase. Maybe he was going through a midlife crisis, trying to feel younger, more energized. Maybe it was his way of dealing with stress. I reassured myself that it didn't affect us, didn't affect me. But one afternoon, as I was flipping through a magazine in the living room, I overheard him talking to one of his friends on the phone. His voice, usually so warm and reassuring, was filled with a new kind of excitement. "Yeah, man," he said, a slight laugh in his voice. "I met someone last night, at the gym. She's in perfect shape. You know, healthy. Like, really healthy. I think I could learn a lot from her. She doesn't eat junk like I used to, you know?" My heart dropped into my stomach, and I froze, the words echoing in my mind. Perfect shape. Healthy. His voice was filled with admiration, and I felt a sickening knot form in my chest. Was he talking about me? Or was this someone else? Someone who didn't have the baggage of late-night snacks and takeout dinners, someone who cared about their body in the way I never had? When the phone call ended, I put down the magazine, my hands trembling. The comfortable certainty I once had about my relationship was slipping away, piece by piece. I knew, in that moment, that Tom was changing, and I wasn't sure if I could keep up. As I sat there, replaying his words in my head, I tried to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. Tom and I had always been close, or at least I thought we were. We shared a deep emotional bond, didn't we? Sure, we had our issues, but who didn't? But it was becoming clear that something was happening to him, and I couldn't deny that a part of me felt left behind. When he came home that evening, I tried to act normal. I greeted him with a smile, but the moment I looked at him, I saw it, his body was different. Tighter. Leaner. More defined. I couldn't help but stare. "You've been working out a lot," I said, my voice sounding almost accusatory, even though I didn't mean it to. He nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, I'm feeling really good, actually. I've been following this new routine. I think it's making a difference." I smiled, though it felt forced. "I'm glad to hear that." But inside, I was sinking. Tom wasn't just physically changing, he was emotionally distancing himself from me. And I could feel it. The warm, easy conversations we used to have over dinner had become strained. The closeness that once defined our relationship seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a coldness I couldn't ignore. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand what had gone wrong. I thought back to our early days together, when we were inseparable. We both had similar views on the world, about people's obsession with beauty, with weight, with physical appearances. It had been one of the things that brought us together. We laughed at the world's obsession with dieting and fitness trends. We believed in something deeper, something more meaningful than what was on the surface. But now, I wasn't so sure. I wasn't sure if Tom even remembered that version of himself anymore. The man who used to joke about how ridiculous the beauty standards were. The man who told me he loved me just the way I was, no matter what. That man seemed to be gone, replaced by someone who was obsessed with fitness and health. Someone who, I feared, might no longer find me desirable. The thoughts churned in my mind like a storm. I thought about the things I'd said to him in the past, about how weight didn't matter, about how only superficial people cared about appearances. Now, I was beginning to wonder if I had been wrong all along. The next morning, I made my usual cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. Tom had already left for work, but the silence in our house felt louder than ever. I felt like a stranger in my own home, unsure of where things had gone wrong, unsure of how to fix it. I couldn't help but wonder, had I been so wrong in my beliefs? Was I really just fooling myself when I claimed that appearance didn't matter? Or had Tom found someone who made him see things differently? Someone who fit the image of perfect health and beauty, someone who had what I lacked? I didn't have the answers yet. But deep down, I knew one thing for sure, everything had changed. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That phone call, his changed routine, the way he looked at me differently now, like he was seeing me through a lens I didn't recognize. Every conversation, every glance, felt strained. Even in the silence between us, there was a distance growing that I couldn't ignore. I had once believed that weight and appearance didn't matter, that love transcended superficial things, but now, I was starting to wonder if I had been wrong all along. I spent the following week trying to avoid thinking about it. I threw myself into work, tried to focus on the little things that usually brought me joy. But no matter what I did, the thought of Tom's new obsession with fitness and health lingered in my mind like an intrusive thought. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that it was just a phase. Maybe he was just going through a midlife crisis, trying to reclaim some youth or energy. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. One evening, when he came home later than usual, I couldn't contain my frustration anymore. The gym bag slung over his shoulder, his clothes tighter than before, the gleam of sweat still on his forehead, it all felt like a constant reminder of how much things were changing. I had to say something, or I was going to lose my mind. "Tom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk." He looked at me, surprised. "About what?" I hesitated, not sure where to start. "About everything. About this whole fitness thing you've got going on. About the way things have been between us." He set his gym bag down on the chair and turned toward me, his face suddenly serious. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know. It's just, you've been different lately. You're always at the gym, you're eating differently, and I feel like you're drifting away from me. It's like you're becoming someone else." Tom's eyes softened, but his expression didn't change. "I'm just trying to take care of myself, Claire. I don't want to feel tired all the time, or like I'm letting myself go. I thought you'd be happy that I'm doing something positive for my health." "I am," I said, though my voice cracked slightly. "I just don't understand. It's not just the working out or the food, it's the way you've been acting. Like you're ashamed of me or something." Tom's face faltered for a moment. "I'm not ashamed of you, Claire. This is just something I'm doing for myself. I didn't realize it was affecting you like this. But I could see the gap growing wider between us. He was so focused on his health, on changing himself, that he couldn't see how his transformation was affecting the very relationship he claimed to value. I had spent years telling him that weight and appearance didn't matter, that love was about something deeper. But now I was beginning to realize that it wasn't just about physical attraction, it was about connection. And somewhere along the way, we had lost that. Later that evening, I called my mom. I needed someone to talk to, someone who knew me before all of this. Before Tom's obsession with fitness, before I started questioning everything about my relationship. "Claire," she said when I told her what was going on. "You've always been stubborn about these things. But maybe it's time to take a step back and think about your health, too. Not just for Tom, but for yourself." I let out a frustrated sigh. "I know, Mom. But that's the thing, I've always told myself that it didn't matter. I've always believed that who I am on the inside is what counts. But now I'm starting to feel like maybe I've been fooling myself. Maybe I've been so focused on defending myself that I've been neglecting my own well-being." "Maybe you're right," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But it's not just about weight, Claire. It's about feeling good about yourself, inside and out. It's about finding balance." The conversation with my mom stuck with me. I realized that I had spent so much of my life rebelling against societal norms that I had neglected my own physical and mental health. My body, my well-being, had become a battleground for my beliefs. I told myself I didn't care about weight, but the truth was that I had ignored the way I felt about myself in the process. And now, Tom was changing, and I wasn't sure I could keep up. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror for what felt like the first time in years. I studied my reflection, not with judgment, but with a strange sense of curiosity. My body had changed over the years, yes, but it wasn't just that. It was the exhaustion in my eyes, the dullness in my skin, the way I had stopped taking care of myself because I didn't think it mattered. I had been so adamant about rejecting superficial beauty standards that I had neglected the most important thing, my health. I wanted to be the woman Tom had fallen in love with, the one who was confident and carefree, who didn't care about appearances. But I also wanted to be the woman who could look at herself in the mirror and feel proud. And right now, I didn't feel that way. Not because of the way I looked, but because of the way I had treated myself. That afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. It wasn't a run or a workout session, just a simple walk to clear my head. But as I walked, I realized something important: I didn't have to change myself for Tom. I didn't have to follow his lead to feel valuable. But I also didn't have to stay stuck in my old beliefs that had kept me from taking care of myself. I wasn't going to give up on the things that mattered to me, on the values that had always been a part of who I was. But maybe, just maybe, I needed to start taking care of myself in a way that felt right for me. Not for anyone else. Not for Tom. Just for me. When I got home, I felt a little lighter. The storm in my mind had calmed, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I was on the right path. I didn't know where this journey would lead, but I was ready to face it. Even if it meant confronting the uncomfortable truth that my marriage might not be as strong as I thought. Even if it meant letting go of some of the beliefs I'd held so tightly to. I was ready to begin again. The confrontation had been inevitable. After weeks of growing distance, of silent tension that seemed to fill every corner of our home, I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to confront Tom about everything that had changed between us, about the way he had become someone I barely recognized. When he walked in that evening, his face lit up as he saw me, but I could tell he was nervous. There was a hesitation in his step that hadn't been there before. I didn't want to be the one to initiate this conversation, but I knew I had no choice. Tom, we need to talk, I said, my voice calm but firm. His face immediately dropped, and I saw the concern flicker in his eyes. What's going on, Claire? I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. You've changed, and I don't know how to handle it anymore. It's not just the gym or the diet, it's like you're becoming a different person, someone I don't recognize. He stood there, silent for a moment, and I could see the struggle in his eyes. It was as though he wanted to defend himself, but also knew, deep down, that I was right. He had changed, and so had I. But unlike him, I wasn't sure what that change meant for us. I don't understand, he said, his voice quiet. I thought you'd be happy. I'm just trying to take better care of myself. And I'm glad you're taking care of yourself, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But it's more than that, Tom. You're so focused on your health, on changing your body, that I feel like I've been left behind. And when I overheard you talking about that woman at the gym, his face paled, and he opened his mouth as if to say something, but then he just closed it. There was no defense, no excuse. I'm sorry, he said, his voice so soft that it barely reached me. I never meant to make you feel this way. But the truth is, I've been feeling disconnected from you for a while now. I didn't know how to talk about it. I could feel the hurt in his words, but it wasn't enough to erase the years of silent tension between us. I had tried to ignore it, to pretend that everything was okay. But it wasn't. And I knew it. Our marriage, once full of warmth and shared beliefs, had become a place where we both felt lonely. You've changed too, Claire, he continued, his voice gaining strength. I get it now. You've always said weight doesn't matter, that it's all about who you are inside. But the truth is, I've been wanting something more. I've been wanting to feel good about myself, to feel healthy, and I've been trying to get that back. And I don't think that's something you've wanted for yourself. I've been waiting for you to care the way I do. His words stung, more than I had expected. I had been so sure that my beliefs about appearances didn't matter, that love and connection should be enough. But it wasn't just about appearances. It was about caring. It was about wanting to feel good in your own skin, about taking care of yourself, something I had neglected for far too long. I know I've neglected myself, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And maybe I've been too stubborn. Maybe I've used my beliefs as an excuse to avoid dealing with my own insecurities. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you, Tom. I just didn't know how to balance it all. Tom stood there, his eyes softening, but the tension between us was palpable. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. There was no simple fix, no magic words that would suddenly restore everything we had lost. But for the first time in a long time, I could see that he was willing to listen. And that was enough. I've been so focused on my own changes that I didn't see how much you've been hurting, he said quietly. I didn't realize that by changing, I was pushing you further away. But maybe we both need to change. Not just for ourselves, but for each other. We've been holding on to the wrong things. The silence between us felt heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes after a long, painful truth has been spoken, when both parties know that change is inevitable, but that change doesn't have to mean the end. I don't know what the future holds for us, I said finally. But I think I need to take care of myself, Tom. I need to find a balance between what I believe and what I need. And I don't want to hold on to the past anymore, to the beliefs that have kept me stuck. I want to grow. For myself. For us. I need to learn how to take care of my health, for my own sake, not because of what anyone else thinks. Not even because of you. Tom nodded, his expression one of understanding, but there was still a sadness in his eyes. He had wanted something more from me, but I wasn't sure if I could give him that anymore. I wasn't sure if I even wanted the same things anymore. The love I had for him was still there, but it was buried beneath layers of doubt, fear, and regret. I understand, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. I don't want to lose you, Claire. But I don't think we can keep going like this, pretending everything is fine when it's not. Maybe we need to take a step back and figure out who we are, both as individuals and as a couple. I looked at him, the man I had spent more than a decade with, and realized that I wasn't sure if we could go back to what we once had. But I also knew that I couldn't stay in a relationship that made me feel invisible. I had to start taking care of myself, not just for him, but for me. I think you're right, I said, my voice steady but resolute. Maybe we do need a break. Maybe we need some space to figure out who we are, without all the pressure of trying to be something we're not. Tom's eyes searched mine, as if he were looking for something, an answer, a sign that this was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal. But I didn't have that answer. All I had was the truth, and the truth was that we had both changed. We weren't the people we once were, and maybe that was okay. As Tom left for the evening, leaving me alone in our house, I sat down in the living room and let the weight of everything settle over me. This wasn't the end, not yet. But it was a beginning. A beginning where I could finally start taking care of myself, where I could find my own path, whether that meant with Tom or without him. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was the right one for me.